Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at the Allegheny County Courthouse in downtown Pittsburgh, and also virtually as well on Zoom for this important hearing to discuss the issues with Pennsylvania's property reassessment system. I am State Senator Katie Muth. I am the chair of our Senate Democratic Policy Committee, and I represent Senate District 44, which is quite a ways away from here on the other side of the state, which is parts of Chester, Berks, and Montgomery counties, all of which struggle with property tax issues as well, so it's a shared struggle across the state. I'm honored to be co-hosting today's policy hearing at the request of Senator Fontana, and we have an amazing lineup of testifiers to talk about this issue. It's a complicated one, but I think certainly we have a lot of great insight through written testimony that was pre-submitted and also the verbal testimony that we're going to hear today. We know that Pennsylvania is the only state in the country that does not require a reassessment ever. So some counties have taken this on their own, others have not, and obviously it creates a lopsided tax system where a lot of landowners or homeowners, especially seniors, see the struggle and see the increase, and we certainly know the impacts of our unfunded public school system that also causes another added burden to this. I'll turn it over to Senator Fontana for his opening remarks, but I just want to say thank you to the staff, the comm staff here today. They had a tight turnaround on a long budget that was late, and all of our staffs that helped organize today to make it a successful event. So Senator Fontana.
Thank you. Yeah, we were sweating it out. I didn't know if I was going to have to cancel or not, but it worked out well. I think it had something to do with this convention that's going on, so the Republicans didn't want to miss it. But anyway, that's another story. But thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Senator Muth and your staff for helping me and my staff. Can't do it without the help of those around us for conducting this critical hearing on statewide property reassessments. I also want to thank the testifiers that are here that wanted to be here, which is great. No one said no, everyone said yes, and I think that says something. There are some elected officials. Rachel Hessler from the city of Pittsburgh is here. She's testifying, which is great. I think we have our county treasurer here, Erica Priscillas, is here. I don't know that I've seen, I think Susan from County Council's here. It's behind the chair. I can't see her, but that's okay. So thank you all for coming. I think it's great that they're here too to add to it and certainly to listen to the testimony. I also there's some thank yous to our county executive Sarah Emirato, County Council President Pacatina, County Council Member at Large Sam DeMarco for their support of me for doing this here in the Gold Room. I certainly let everybody know I was doing it here before I actually scheduled it, and they all were fine with that. I just commented about the soft chairs here. They weren't this way 20 years ago when I was here, because I was here 20 years ago, and I sat in this very room as an Allegheny County Council member. I was also the chair of the council's assessment committee back then, and what I was doing here then was advocating for my own bill to conduct scheduled reassessments every 3 years. That was after a court order reassessment back then. Obviously and unfortunately, that bill failed to become law, and the main reason it failed, and that was politics. Certainly not good government, that's for sure. But not to worry, I'm back, and I haven't given up yet. It's been a while. But it should be noted that back then there was only 1 or 2 states actually doing scheduled regular statewide reassessments. Today, there's only 1 that doesn't do regularly scheduled statewide reassessments, and that's us, folks. That's the state of Pennsylvania. We all know that that Allegheny County is again facing a court-ordered reassessment, but Allegheny County is not alone. Other counties throughout our state are saddled with decade-old property value data. Today, Pennsylvania has become the poster child for how not to run a property reassessment system. I know just the idea of a property reassessment is dreaded, but that's because we wait so long between those reassessments. It's time to acknowledge there is a cost to our inaction, and that's why we're here today. We're here to hear from experts about how taxpayers are paying for our dysfunctional property reassessment system. This afternoon's testifiers will demonstrate why a scheduled statewide reassessment is vitally needed and why it should be done as soon as possible throughout the whole state of Pennsylvania. So I'm looking forward to our discussion, and I'll turn it back to Senator Muth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Fontana. And I want to mention to the right of me is Senator Lindsey Williams, and then to the left of me is Senator Costa, our caucus leader. I'm not sure, I don't know if anyone else is online. Senator Carney's online participating virtually, so members may get on and off throughout, and I will do my best to announce them so that they also can participate in the Q&A portion and the discussion part of the hearing. And so each panelist, this is our housekeeping list of rules for how we run our hearings. Each panelist will keep their testimony to 5 to 7 minutes. I'll try to give you a little wave as you approach that time. If you're really on a roll, I might give you an extra 1 or 2 minutes, but we try to keep it on time so that everyone that is scheduled to participate isn't pushed back. After a set of panelists does their testimony, we will open it up for members to ask you all questions. And if you submitted any written testimony in advance, we all have it in our binders. It's also uploaded online at senatormuth.com/policy. So it is available to all the public. We try to be as transparent and inclusive as possible so that people have the materials that we're all working from. And this is being live streamed. There will also be a recording of this hearing available online afterwards for those that could not participate in real time that you can share out, and we encourage you to do so. And there's also a section where those that may have additional feedback that weren't a part of today's hearing can submit online at senatormuth.com/policy to give your insight or your ideas on any issue, but certainly this one. And we share that, whatever comes in, with our members so that they have that information as well. And what makes us better policymakers is by having the most input from all involved and impacted. So we will start with our first panel of testifiers that are going to discuss the effects on municipalities and school districts and our lack of reassessment. So I would like to introduce the superintendent from Mount Lebanon School District, Dr. Melissa Frias, and thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is all yours. And just make sure your mic's on, you just have to hit the button. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Senators Muth, Fontana, Carney, Costa, and Williams, thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Dr. Melissa Frias, and I have spent the past 22 years serving both urban and suburban school districts in Allegheny County as a teacher, principal, assistant superintendent, and superintendent. This month, I began my second year as the superintendent of the Mount Lebanon School District. Today, I'm here to talk to you about how property tax reassessments and common level ratios have impacted the Mount Lebanon School District's budget, which ultimately impacts our ability to provide services to students. Mount Lebanon is located in the southern suburbs of Allegheny County. We serve a community of 6 square miles with approximately 34,000 residents, approximately 14,000 homes, and 5,500 K-12 students. Due to the lack of available land to build, the Mount Lebanon community does not see yearly additions of new homes or business structures. 3/4 or 75% of our district's budget is generated from local revenue sources. The main source of the district's revenue is real estate tax, which accounts for 63% of our budget. State revenue sources provide 24% of our budget, and 1% is from federal revenue sources. The district utilizes a process for reassessing properties when they are sold. The District Real Estate Council uses a method to determine what properties to assess. The equation takes the sale price of the home, multiplies it by the common level ratio, and then subtracts out the current assessment. If the difference is $400,000 or more, they file an appeal on behalf of the school district. The idea for the difference is that if we were to be successful in our assessment, the gain in revenue is about $10,000 per year in school taxes. We would be looking for such a gain given the cost of litigation as well as the need to have efficient deployment of district resources. In recent years, the largest impact on our revenues has been commercial property that has utilized the common level ratio ruling to benefit from reduced assessed values. The CLR, as you know, is the average ratio between the fair market value and the assessed value in the given county. And in Allegheny County, in 2021, Joffrey versus Fitzgerald lawsuit alleged that Allegheny County inaccurately reported property sales taxes to set the CLR, resulting in an unfairly high ratio and overassessments for property owners. On September 1st of 2022, a preliminary injunction was entered reducing the CLR from 81.1% to 63.5% for 2022 and ordered Allegheny County to supply Pennsylvania's State Tax Equalization Board with new data to recalculate the 2022 CLR. This resulted in a CLR of 63.6% in 2023 and 54.5% in 2024. As a result of the action taken by Allegheny County Council in February of 2023, taxpayers were allowed to retroactively appeal tax year 2022 at the adjusted ratio, in addition to filing an appeal for the tax year of 2023. In our community, commercial properties have taken advantage of this ruling, which has resulted in increased tax refunds. Over the last 5 years, we have refunded the following total amounts for each school year. In 2019-2020, it was $15,636 approximately. In 2020-2021, $58,271 approximately. The first year of the CLR lawsuit ruling in 2021-2022, we refunded $439,150 approximately. This is more than 2,700% increase in refunds from 2019 to 2020. In 2022-2023, we refunded $243,500 approximately. And while this total went down from year over year, in 2023-2024, we hit record refunds. Last school year, we refunded over $1.2 million. More than 75% of these refunds were paid to commercial properties. And for the 2024-2025 school year, we project to refund between $1.5 and $1.8 million. In addition to the reduced revenue due to reassessments, we also pay for legal counsel to represent us in these cases, which is not cheap. The rising tax refunds and increased legal fees significantly affect our budget, ultimately impacting our students. The Mount Lebanon School District has maintained a consistent yearly enrollment of approximately 5,500 students for many years. It is significantly challenging for the district to make improvements and pay for increased costs of products, services, and labor while considering the burden of taxes on our residents. However, this is the only source of income that we have some control over, unlike the state and federal revenue provided to our district. The impact of the CLR on our commercial property assessments has resulted in the district raising taxes each year for the last 3 years. This year, in addition to raising taxes to the Act 1 index, we also had to reduce the number of professional and paraprofessional staff, reduce money allocated to supplies and services, and revise programming to be more cost-effective. Mount Lebanon is not the only school district in Allegheny County that is directly impacted by real estate assessments and the common level ratio lawsuit. In my role as superintendent, the need to be hypercritical on finances is more important than ever. I've become more aware of the inequities related to the current antiquated system that our state utilizes to complete property assessments. No longer should it be the sole responsibility of a school district to fix Pennsylvania's outdated property assessment system. There is a need to modernize this process and to create an equitable system that can be consistently implemented across our Commonwealth. Only state leaders like you can ensure that this occurs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Frias. I believe our next testifier is virtual. Ira Weiss, the solicitor for Pittsburgh Public Schools, is participating on Zoom. So, Ira, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. We can hear you loud and clear. The floor is all yours.
Madam Chair, Senator Muth, Senator Fontana, Senators Williams, and Senator Costa. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to present testimony on the cost of inaction on the real estate assessment reform. By way of brief background, I've represented taxing bodies, principally school districts, for over 50 years, and with a particular focus on local tax matters. I'm a former Allegheny County solicitor and currently solicitor for the School District of Pittsburgh, where I actually began with the district doing their real estate tax assessment cases in 1996. I also handled the Clifton reassessment case in Allegheny County back in 2005. That reassessment was completed in 2012. And I currently represent Pittsburgh Public Schools in the lawsuit that was referenced in the opening remarks by the panel. As has been noted, the tax assessment system in this county and in Pennsylvania is broken. It's often been said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, or another way, if you do what you have always done, you will get the results you have always gotten. It's clear, and I will not reiterate the fact that there have been numerous court findings that failure to reassess properties on a timely basis and a regular basis leads to non-uniformity, which violates Article 8, Section 1 of our Constitution. That was the holding in the Clifton case. That was the holding in the Betters case, which is a recent case in Beaver County, which mandated a reassessment there. As higher valued properties become underassessed, those owners pay less than their fair share. And as lower valued properties become overassessed due to the common level ratio dropping, those owners pay more than they should. In many cases, they're the least able to do that. We know the impact of the CLR. We know what happens when adjustments are not made. Dr. Freeze has described the plummeting common level ratio in this county. What is the solution? I suggest that there needs to be mandatory reassessments of no more than every 5 years, with a trending analysis in the third year of that period. That is a very similar system to which exists in Ohio. I would submit that this should be administered at the state level. It would take local politics out of the assessment system. We all know that assessments have been called the third rail of county politics, and only a statewide, state-administered system will work. We also must provide taxpayers and taxing bodies equal access to the appeal system. Some will raise the specter of windfall revenues to school districts and municipalities. Act 1, which is the law that restricts the right of school district to raise taxes, provides clearly that a school district may not receive more in tax revenue the year following a reassessment than it received the year prior to the reassessment. Therefore, there is no windfall. Some may pay more, some may pay less, depending on the appropriateness of their valuation, and some may see no change at all. But we know this from experience in Allegheny County and my experience as a lawyer in other counties. Millage gets adjusted downward when the new numbers are finalized. For counties and municipalities, there is a 5% window. What is the impact of this? Well, again, following up on what Dr. Freeze has told us, School District of Pittsburgh has made over $22 million in refunds the last 3 years. Baldwin Whitehall has made about $1,500,000. Bethel Park, $3,300,000. Chartiers Valley, almost $900,000. Gateway School District, close to $7 million. Montour School District, almost $5.4 million. Stone Rocks, which is small and a distressed school district under the control of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, has made almost $47,000, which in that district is a great deal of money. Upper St. Clair, over $3 million. West Jefferson Hills, almost $1 million. The pattern is very clear. No school district can operate with those kinds of refunds. School districts negotiate labor contracts based upon projections of revenue. School districts borrow money for capital improvements, purchase of school buses, purchase of technology, all based upon reasonable expectations of revenue. Stability is the key for governments to operate. I would also submit to the panel that there are no winners when you have the kind of system we have now. Taxpayers lose, and I believe developers are more prone to come to counties where the tax base is stable and predictable. I would submit that we must act. The cost of inaction to get taxing bodies, especially school districts, is cutbacks in programs, as we have heard already. Layoff of employees, which is limited under Pennsylvania school code. Some distressed school districts and Act 47 municipalities. I would submit to the panel that we cannot afford this cost and would urge the panel to recommend appropriate legislation to correct this situation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weiss. Appreciate your thorough written testimony. It was helpful to follow along as you said the numbers with your written, so thank you for submitting that. Mike Sully, thank you for being with us. You are did I pronounce your last name correct?
Yes, you did.
I hate when people mispronounce mine, so I'm humble enough to ask to verify. From the Allegheny County Board of Property Assessment Appeals, thank you for joining us, and the floor is all yours.
Okay, Chairperson Muth, thank you for inviting me, and good day to Senator Williams, Senator Fontana, and Senator Costa. I'm coming from a different perspective. Over the last 30 years, I've been on the other side of this issue regarding the administration of the assessment system in Allegheny County. I was part of the oversight of 2 court-ordered reassessments. Allegheny was ordered to conduct a reassessment in 2001 and 2012. For some reason, I ended up being the only person in charge of 2 of those court-ordered reassessments. Sleepless nights, okay? Also, I served as manager of the assessment office for Allegheny County for 6.5 years. And I've been on the Board of Property Assessment 2 terms, once in the 90s. And in the 90s, I want everyone to know, the common level ratio was an issue. And commercial buildings were getting huge tax reductions in the 90s. And again, it was publicized, and it's here we go again, 20-some years later, 25 years later. I was also a consultant in the Joe Free versus Allegheny County Common Level Ratio lawsuit. That is when there was a correction to the CLR, as it is known, and it had a huge impact on the tax refunds that are being issued now. I'm just going to give it from my perspective. Over the last 30 years, it's Groundhog Day in Pennsylvania. Each year, I've been in court 30 years on these issues, and all I can tell you, this is how it works. Counties decide not to reassess. Someone sues the county and wins in every case. They always win. The court orders a reassessment, and it's almost like going into receivership when the court says you do this, or tax bills don't go out. It happens over and over again. That is the present system that we use now. Pennsylvania, in my opinion, needs a total overhaul. This is long overdue. 49 states require cyclical reassessments. Pennsylvania does not. Counties can go on for decades without value adjustments. Butler County, which borders Allegheny County, hasn't had a reassessment since 1969. If I got a team together and went to Butler County, the common level ratio would be reduced to 1%. Westmoreland County hasn't had a reassessment since 1972, and that's okay, because counties can opt in if they choose. If I could, I would get a team together and sue Westmoreland County and lower the common level ratio to 1%. I'm confident that many counties have an artificially high rate. Pennsylvania uses a base year system where you have your reassessment and those values remain frozen for decades. And the base year system, I was in court years ago, a common pleas court judge, R. Stanton Wettig, in court said that the base year was a figment of the imagination of the General Assembly. Maybe he was right, because it isn't working. Counties can choose to reassess whenever they want. When they do not, there's a court order. In other words, tax bills will not go out unless you reassess the county under a court order. That's the way it is. It's inevitable. Politicians have claimed that the base year is consistent and stable. It is not. It is a house of cards, as we can see what has happened in the last 3 years. State law mandates a complicated annual equalization factor, which is known as the common level ratio. Everyone uses the term, but the common level ratio is only used in appeals. On average, in the Commonwealth, only 2% of the people appeal and end up applying the common level ratio. That means everyone else is stuck. 98% of the population, the assessments are essentially frozen for decades. Just not fair. So let's get back to the common level ratio. The ratio is used to apply lower assessments to current market value in an appeal. And as we know, the ratio from the lawsuit can be subject to manipulation. If property values go up, the common level ratio must go down. And people are starting to realize how that works in Pennsylvania. I believe that an honest audit in most counties will conclude the CLR is overly inflated. It wasn't just Allegheny County. Here's how the Allegheny County appeal system has been in turbulence just for the last 3 years because of our lawsuit. In 2021, all the school districts and municipalities in Allegheny County filed appeals on the so-called underassessments. And they were successful in increasing the assessed value $462 million in 1 year. That was for a tax year, that was in 2021, $462 million. Here we are 3 years later, since January 1, the assessed value that has been decreased for property owners, $350 million. That's an $8 million swing in 3 years. There's no stability. There's no consistency. You can go up and down any street in any county in Pennsylvania, and there's no rhyme or reason to how those properties were assessed over a period of time. And I'm going to close with a statement from 15 years ago in a Clifton case that I was involved with when I was with Allegheny County. The Supreme Court, in an opinion, wrote to the General Assembly. You may be familiar with the passage, but here's what the state Supreme Court said in the Clifton case. Only the General Assembly can develop a comprehensive system of assessing property that considers the approaches of all the other states. While there may be very well come a time when this court will be obliged to fill, keywords, the legislative void in this area, it is today's decision that provides notice to the General Assembly to make any necessary amendments to the constitutionality when applied as it is applied elsewhere. The state constitution is crystal clear. All taxes must be uniform. So most of these legal issues, in my opinion, will all go away if the General Assembly checks only 2 boxes, and I'm going to read from my notes here. It is time for the General Assembly to roll up your sleeves and check 2 boxes. Number 1, reassess all properties statewide every 3 years. You have a calendar, you can't manipulate the calendar, you don't have to use statistics. Every 3 years, everyone will know it's coming. You only deal with the common level ratio for 2 years. Then you recalibrate when you revalue all the properties, and everyone is paying their fair share. And that's the goal. So that's the first box, reassess every 3 years. Second box, a comprehensive field review of all properties in the state every 6 years. I worked with Mr. George Donatello in the Sabre reassessment. We were up in the North Hills. There was a cluster of 5 apartment buildings. This is during the reassessment. And he said, Mike, what do you see? And I said, 5 apartment buildings. Mike, what do you see? 5 apartment buildings. He said, look at your county blotter. Looked at it. It was listed as a vacant lot for 20 years, these 5 buildings. Do you know why? Because county assessors have no field reviews. There's no mandate to go out and look and see what's going on. We added millions to the tax rolls during the field review process. I don't know if you're aware of this, state law says that you can go back 6 years. If I find out that building was there for 6 years, we don't have to wait for the reassessment to put that building on the tax rolls. So in my opinion, based on my experience, that will pay for the reassessment because everyone talks about it. But no field, some properties haven't been looked at in 50 years. How do we know how do we know what's there? And it's a lot easier today than it was during the Sabre reassessment. There was a paper orientation there. We have a state-of-the-art CAMA system, computer-assisted mass appraisal system. We just don't use it. So I want to thank you, Chairperson Muth, Fontana, and the Policy Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I hope that state lawmakers will consider my recommendations. There's only 2. It's not that difficult. And just make it happen. It's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I don't know, I can speak for myself, but I know Senator Williams is also a first-time home buyer in the last couple years, as am I. So I've learned a lot from everyone that has spoken thus far. So it's very helpful because we all represent different areas and different tricks are done to manipulate the numbers or keep things. Yeah, so I appreciate your thoroughness. Our final testifier for this panel, we have Rachel Heisler, the Controller of the City of Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Before I get started today, I'd like to offer some brief thoughts on the attempted assassination of former President Trump in Butler County over the weekend. First, we must thank Saturday's first responders, our medics, and law enforcement, including local and state police, the Secret Service, and the FBI. We must never fail to acknowledge those who run toward danger every day and have earned our collective gratitude. It goes without saying that violence should not play a part in our political system. We win at the ballot box. This principle is a cornerstone of our democratic process and what separates us from much of the world. I understand the instinct to point across the aisle and say, they started it, but it does not matter right now. We must all work together to change the trajectory of our intensifying partisanship. This does not mean we are neutral in our political beliefs. Rather, this moment requires we engage with each other with care. We all have agency to improve this environment. We must de-escalate the political discourse, tone down the heat in our social media posts, acknowledge our own political rigidity, and work together to ensure our elections remain free, fair, and safe. Most importantly, we must reject calls for violence, whether they look like they looked on January 6th, 2021, or on Saturday in Butler. Now, I'll begin my testimony. Good afternoon, Senator Fontana and Senator Muth. Thank you. Senator Williams, Senator Costa, it's nice to see you here. Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to offer testimony in my position as Controller of the City of Pittsburgh. Property taxes are a critical source of revenue that helps make it possible for our government to function and provide essential services to our residents. In 2023, city property taxes totaled nearly $149 million, constituting 22% of all general fund revenues. For the 10-year window from 2014 through 2023, the City of Pittsburgh collected $1.4 billion in property taxes. These funds are integral. While anecdotal, our office is also currently processing and distributing more than $7 million in city property tax refunds alone, some of which date back to 2019. While some of these refunds are driven by the rapid changes facing property owners downtown, the bigger story should be that the current system is slow, protracted, and ultimately unfair, as it disproportionately benefits those who have the resources to file an appeal. I agree with Senator Fontana and many others that the current property assessment process in Allegheny County and across the state is dysfunctional and untenable. I appreciate your commitment to seek out better solutions. As has been acknowledged by others, we know that the current system truly only reassesses when a property is purchased. Even then, assessments are narrowly applied, meaning a new assessment is typically applied on new housing, but not necessarily existing housing. When existing housing is bought and sold, assessments are leveled randomly, which leaves neighbors with similarly priced homes purchased 6 months apart with drastically different tax liabilities. Either way, we know assessments are disproportionately levied on new construction and, by extension, renters and more recent homebuyers, at a time when we need to be expanding our housing stock and attracting more people to the city of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh already has an inventory problem, and the current assessment process does not incentivize new development. In fact, I would argue it hinders it. We can and should conduct this process in a way that is fair to all property owners across the Commonwealth. Programs to assist vulnerable homeowners should be targeted. We must prevent people from being priced out of their homes and neighborhoods with steeply rising housing prices. For example, I support Senator Costa's legislation to create a program to provide tax relief for long-time owner-occupied properties in certain neighborhoods. Our office looks forward to making sure that this program, known as LOOP, is thoughtfully implemented to protect the most vulnerable residents in these growing neighborhoods. I also believe that we should establish a system of fair and regular assessments across Pennsylvania. In my opinion, relying on each county to create its own system would be more protracted and inefficient, more irregular and unfair, and more costly. Most importantly, it would remove political considerations from decision-making and give municipalities, school districts, and taxpayers the predictability they require. As you know, Pennsylvania is the only state that does not require regular reassessments, and I appreciate all of your efforts to change that. Thank you for holding this hearing and for allowing me to offer testimony today. As you continue to conduct hearings and develop solutions, know that our office stands by, ready to be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And I just want to say thank you to all of you for being right on time. So appreciate it as the host who gets stressed out about timing. So thank you, because it gives us time for Q&A. So I'll start with Senator Fontana for the first question.
I have lots of questions.
Why we're here.
Dr. Freeze, so in Mount Lebanon, obviously the cost of all those costs that you were talking about to do that, there's also a cost, I would assume, even to do the spot assessments, basically, right? That you're doing to try to keep up. And I would assume then, as I think you mentioned, that you have to raise your millage in order to compensate. So has it been, did you say it happened the last 3 years?
I think that's what she said.
And what kind, so the cost of doing that, the cost to the taxpayer, right, to do that. One of the things, and I think Ara mentioned it too, the cost of not doing it is something that I think we need to focus in on. And I think we can, all the way down the line, can talk about that. So even for a more affluent municipality like Mount Lebanon, it's still a big cost. It's still something that that's a burden on the taxpayers. Would you agree?
I would agree. So last year, we spent about $60,000 on the reassessments, which seems like a small number, but it's commitment of time as well as funds. When we look at our raise in taxes from the last 3 years, for instance, in 2022, our millage was 26.39. In 2023, 27.59. In this coming school year, it'll be 29.3005. And when you think about the impact on that, it's a lot for our taxpayers, especially for individuals who have a fixed income, right? So if you have a home value, an assessed value of $100,000, with that millage increase of 1.7105, it's about $14.25 a month, or $171.05 annually. And some people would say, the common statement is, oh, that's like a Starbucks. Well, for some people, they don't have the opportunity to do just a Starbucks, right? On a $500,000 house, that millage increase is about $71 per month for approximately $855 per year. And that's not including the amount that they have to pay that's for the addition of that millage. So yes, it is an impact. For us, as I shared, the majority of our refunds have come out of the view of commercial properties. And that's really challenging too, because somebody has to make up for it. And a lot of times our number of homes highly outnumbers our number of commercial properties. So they become the individuals that are paying more.
Thank you. Is Ira still on?
Yeah, it should be.
Yes.
So I was wondering, Ira, you mentioned all the court cases that you were involved in, and I can only remember back the one court case actually ended up at the Supreme Court, and they sort of punted on it because, in my view, if the Supreme Court back in the day would have said everybody should do it statewide, then it would be done. But it never seemed to get there, right? It was always just local courts that had people sued to, and they made a ruling to do it, which, as Mike said, every single time they won. Am I accurate there? It never got to the Supreme Court, or if it did, it didn't happen?
Well, the case that you cite, Senator, the Clifton case, the court upheld the decision of Judge Williams to order a reassessment, but noted that it had no power to impose that as a matter of law. I mean, you may recall many years ago, the Supreme Court ordered the Commonwealth to undertake paying the costs of the courts throughout the Commonwealth, but that has never occurred. So it really is upon the legislature to do this.
Okay.
I mean, the courts have said the current system we have, and what we're dealing with now is very much like we had at Clifton, is unconstitutional. That is, it's non-uniform. But the legislature must undertake to reform it statutorily. So yes, to the degree the Supreme Court did not order it, you're right, they punted. And I would hope with efforts like this, the legislature will once and for all undertake this and end this constant cycle of litigation and expenses and volatile assessments.
But the point is, I think what you're saying is the General Assembly has to do it, the court can't do it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Just, Mike, for you talked about appeals and the cost of appeals and even the common level ratio, that if we do it every 3 years, the cost of those appeals after the first one, I would imagine, right, will go away, or the cost of that will get on. And the common level ratio, if we did it every 3 years, it wouldn't be very relevant. It wouldn't be a relevant factor going forward.
In the first year of a reassessment, there's no common level ratio. Yeah, it's based on current market value. Second year, third year, common level ratio. Property values won't change that much in a couple of years. So you recalibrate and you have a reassessment every 3 years. Like I said, you purge all of the appeals decisions when you have a reassessment. Similar homes will have similar tax bills.
And
So
you get paid, I mean, as far as the cost of the appeals, the county pays for that.
Yeah,
They
it's
pay
great.
for it, so there's a cost to the county.
Yeah, they have
not-
hearings.
Right.
And, it ends up in court on the high-end stuff. But it's just the angst involved with not having reassessments for 30, 40 years with sticker shock. You won't get the sticker shock if you do it every 3 years.
And Rachel, you mentioned about new development, and certainly that's I represent downtown as a senator, and there is no, because of what's happened with the cost or the common level ratio, reducing everything, and now all those buildings are going, people are leaving rather than coming, and that's another cost, I would think, for us and for the municipality of the city of Pittsburgh.
We collect a tax every time a property is bought and sold, the deed transfer tax. We collect on these downtown conversions. We'll collect a tax, their annual real estate bill, and then if they're working, we'll collect their their wage taxes. So we have to do everything that we possibly can for the fiscal health of the city of Pittsburgh to keep people living here, whether it's downtown, Homewood, the slopes, the north side. We have to do everything that we possibly can.
Stability would help that, I would
Yes.
think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think too, we have identified, our office, outside leaders, and probably you all, that we have an inventory issue in Pittsburgh. We need more housing of all, affordable units, middle income units, affluent units for affluent folks, and anything that discourages that in terms of just having no certainty as it relates to property tax liability is, very concerning to my office and my role as city controller.
Yeah, in the future, they come, obviously, all the developers in the city coming for money to convert, but you want that to continue. I mean, you make that investment and you want it to make sure it goes on, right? That it's worth it and people aren't going to go 5-10 years and then bail out.
Yeah.
Something good has to
Some
happen
of
to
it.
keep it.
Yeah, and we need to do everything we can.
Yeah.
If we're going to create housing downtown, figuring out this property tax situation within the city,
Part of it,
within the
yeah.
county, would really be a huge help.
Thank you, Senator Muth.
Senator Williams.
Thank you, Senator Muth. Controller Heisler, you talked about, and sorry if I steal your thunder, Senator Costa, but you talked about Senator Costa's longtime owner occupier or LOOP program as something I'm a proud co-sponsor of to help longtime owners. Mr. Soley, this leads into a question for Mr. Soley. You talked about your two recommendations, and one of them was strong anti-windfall provisions. So what else do you think we should be doing to protect against that, to protect longtime owners like Loop will do for Allegheny County that we were able to get over the finish line this year?
Loop is a wonderful program, all right? You know what's better? If you have a reassessment, 1/3 of the properties will see tax decreases. People on the edges, people in the Mon Valley here in Allegheny County are paying thousands more than they should be paying, and they don't even know it. And the only way they can find uniformity and get a fair assessment is they have to appeal it. They don't know what to do. The school districts 2 years ago filed 90% of the appeals were the school districts saying the underassessments, jack them up. See, the county already knows that the assessments are out of whack. You cannot appeal your way to uniformity. You want affordable housing? This reassessment, people will see tax decrease. I don't care what anyone has said in the past. 1/3 of the properties, the taxes will go down. 1/3 of the properties, the taxes will go up, and they should, and 1/3 will stay the same. Period. That's affordable housing.
I love that quote, can't appeal your way to uniformity. I think that's my quote of the hearing so far.
Thank you.
And now, this is a question for, Mr. Weiss or Dr. Freeze. As Ed Chair, I spend a lot of my time on ed policy and ed spending. We just, wrapped the state budget. It, invested in our schools, to me, not as much as we are constitutionally obligated, but it did make a increase in investment next year. And you both mentioned it in your testimony, the unpredictability. But can you talk a little bit about the things that I don't think people realize, that there is mandated costs that you can't cut when you are refunding $22 million a year, special education, charter school facilities. Can you talk a little bit about those things that you can't move in your budget?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start, and then Ira, you can add on. One of the things that comes up each year when we are budgeting is the idea of salaries and the benefit costs. Those are all negotiated or they're state mandated. So you have your salaries for teachers, you have your health insurance costs, which have gone up historically over the course of the last 5 years, and then you have PISA rates, which have, at one point kind of started to plateau, but there's still a significant amount of money that we have to plan for. In addition to that, things like heating, cooling, telephone service. You can't say we're not going to heat a building, or we're not going to cool a building, or we're not going to give people toilet paper. It may sound minuscule, but it is pretty significant. So when you take it aside and you look at the percentage of a budget that is fixed costs, we're talking like 85 to 90% of a budget that's a fixed cost. This past year, we went through a very, very rigorous process to create a budget for this coming school year, and it included a lot of really difficult conversations because we know that we're going to have to continue to pay out in these reassessments, but also pay for the things that we need to run a school district, which can be really complicated. And not necessarily, the public doesn't always understand it because you're not completely connected to what's happening. As a school district this year, we tried our best to really explain to the community, to get involved, sharing information online so that it was very transparent about what we were doing, because no one likes raised taxes. Let's be honest, none of us in this room like increased taxes. But at some point they have to occur in order for us to be able to do what we need to do for kids, because that's why we're here.
Yeah, especially when they see big corporations in their community getting money back and their taxes went up.
It's hard.
Mr. Weiss, did you have anything to add?
Yes, I do, Senator. I want to thank you and your committee for your efforts on behalf of the school district and public education generally. In addition to those costs enumerated by Dr. Freeze, several large items are the cost of mandated transportation. That is to say, to transport your own students, you must transport charter students and non-public students. And the big one for a lot of districts, and certainly for the Pittsburgh School District, are charter schools. Pittsburgh spends over $100 million on charter schools a year. To give that to context, the budget is in excess of $800 million. That cost is going up every year. And those are the kinds of costs, in addition to those enumerated by Dr. Freeze, that are very hard to manage when you have a volatile tax base.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure. Senator Costa.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank all of you for your testimony today. It's really important to understand exactly what's going on. Mr. Scholl, you talked a little bit about one of the things I wanted to bring up was related to the disparity in terms of people who don't realize that they're paying way too much in taxes, and that the only way to really resolve that is by having a system. Can you talk reassessment? Can you talk a little bit about those 1/3 of the folks who they look like and what neighborhoods they look to be in?
Well, it's Robin Hood in reverse. This is what I know just from what I've seen in the appeal system in Allegheny County over the last 20 years. The school districts historically will appeal the underassessments, which means the high-end properties aren't paying their fair share. The school districts will not appeal the lower end areas. You know, I'm talking Mon Valley, yeah, your district, your area, you know, some of those areas. You know, I've looked at properties that sell for $50,000 that are assessed double that. You know, they're probably paying double what they should be paying. You know, they shouldn't be paying double. But they don't know how to appeal. You shouldn't have to appeal to have a fair tax bill. And it's the responsibility of government to make sure that the people on the edges there don't have to tell government my tax bill's wrong. Fix it. Fix it now.
In the absence, though, of a statewide reassessment every 3 years or so, do you have any suggestions as a program that maybe that the Commonwealth or a county could look at to?
See, I'm in the valuation business. I'm not in the circuit breakers, I call them. A circuit breaker gives certain people an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, the homestead program, which initially was sold as a huge tax break. But I don't know about you, I get a couple hundred, you know, most people it's $200-300 a year. It's not that much. Mm-hmm. So, no, I can't recommend the circuit breakers. All I know is that people don't mind paying their fair share in taxes as long as they know everyone else is.
Yeah.
Right? And I've had people tell me that in an appeal. My assessment's right. But you know what really burns me up, Mr. Soley, is the house across the street is larger than mine and they're paying less than me. And that's because we don't reassess in cycles. It's up to the General Assembly as in the Clifton case, the Supreme Court said, just get it done.
Thank you.
Sorry, I couldn't help there on that.
Thank you for that response. And thank each of you for the kind comments about the Loop program. But I will tell you, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work that we started this about 10 years ago. Then Representative Gainey and Representative Wheatley, we started down this path. And more recently, our county executive in Emirato, all part of that conversation. And we do think it's important. And Controller Heisler, I really hope that you play an integral part and whatever the development of that program looks like, and I will join you in encouraging the administration to work closely with you. I'm not quite sure what official role your office will play, but I think outside of that, I think it's important that you be part of that conversation for the city of Pittsburgh. So thank you all.
And if you can't answer this, I'm just going to ask because it's kind of an unfair one in terms of, I don't expect you to know all the things beyond Pennsylvania, but in terms of the way other states assess or do reassessments, when it comes to the new home construction, is that why some of these developers tend to go to other states that have a more stable system? Or just that people can't, like the fact that we're missing the housing inventory piece that you mentioned being an issue in terms of this being like a barrier? Is the higher assessment for new home construction a regular thing in other states, or is it just Pennsylvania? Sure, go for it. Whoever wants to answer.
All right. I don't think that they'll go to other states to build and develop. You know, there's development here in Pennsylvania. There's opportunity. Unfortunately, because of the base year system, if you build new construction in Allegheny County today, it's assessed at the 2012 base year cost approach, which is a lower number. Unfortunately, the property sells for double that, and then the school district will appeal that and jack it up. So the base year is useless in an appeal when the properties go up. The developers are just selling properties. They don't get involved in the appeal side of it. But again, there's two sides to this. The assessor will go out, measure the property, come up with a lower value based on 2012 cost approach, which is uniform under state law. But then the school district, which I believe has a right to appeal the market value, the present day market value. So you have this hybrid here that just doesn't make any sense at all.
So when, and I agree, one of the, I personally, in my county, when we purchased our home, it was new construction. So you have to have all these things submitted to the county and
Right.
appraisal to close, right? So this appraisal was submitted to the county and they agree and they give you your deed and you move on. And 2 months later, you get a thing in the mail that says that your house has been reassessed at this value more. In our case, $150,000 more than what we paid for. So I'm like, well, gee, what occurred in this 2 months that made our home worth so much more money? And if you didn't, to your earlier point, know to appeal, then I'm sure the majority of my neighbors are, well, my husband posted in the Facebook group that they should file for an appeal, but I don't know if they did, but we did. And you have to pay to file for the appeal and then go, and we did end up getting it, but my point is that 2 months went by, you get this in the mail, and our people, maybe if people moved in from another state, they're not used to this, they don't challenge, they don't, it's not like it says when you close on your home that this says anywhere. It was actually the lady who was there to sign the documents who recommended it, so God bless her. But we wouldn't have known that, and I'm a state senator.
Senator, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Because I just told you your scenario. We get people coming in from out of state, and they say, and I'm going to be honest with you, they say, how often do you reassess in Pennsylvania? Never. Oh, well, what's going to happen if I buy a home in Pennsylvania? What happened to you? School district will file an appeal based on the sales price, and you're going to end up paying 40-50% more than your neighbors until the next reassessment, which could be 30-40 years if everything stays the same. It's crazy. Change it.
So my last question is, when I think of this, I also think of my grandmother who had a home in Latrobe, Westmoreland County is where I grew up, and eventually had to sell her home because she could no longer afford the property taxes. So what, if we do this reassessment, what are mechanisms to ensure that no one is booted out of their home, like they're unable to meet these, if they should be one of the 1/3 that you said their costs would go up? Are there mechanisms in which we can cap that for people on fixed incomes? Because when you, Dr. Frias, when you mentioned fixed income people, I'm also thinking of pre-Act 9 educators and school staff and state employees that have not had a COLA in over 20-some years. They're really pinching pennies. And I'm sure, certainly the ones, I can only speak to my Senate district where home values are off the charts. In Chester County, it's like the most sought after county to live. So if one of those individuals had their home reassessed, I imagine it would be worth significantly more than what it was when they first bought it, however, 30 whatever some years ago. What can we do to make sure that seniors aren't, or people on fixed incomes aren't priced out of staying in their homes? Sure, whoever, anyway.
Anti-windfall, strong anti-windfall legislation lowers the millage rate. And I'm saying right out of the gate, there are people paying more now than they should be paying. They don't know it. Help them. You shouldn't have to appeal to get a lower tax bill. That's a good start.
A couple, just to Senator Muth's question, I'm going to bet that Sharon and probably the realtors could even answer that a little better when you get to that panel. But I wanted to ask you about the base year 2012, just jumped in my head. That never changed. So you set the base year, it was set in 2012, but there was nothing to say it should be adjusted every year, 3 years, 5 years going forward. So here we are 2024, and it's the same base year number.
It's like a tray of ice cubes. They're frozen for all these years. You were here in 2002, Senator? 2002.
Yeah.
There was a reassessment.
Right.
2012, there was a reassessment. I was around for both of those. Over a 10-year period, 90% of the properties in the county didn't change. 90%. Frozen.
So when you set a base year, there's no adjustment. There's nobody says you should adjust it going forward.
Dead on arrival. That value does not change unless it changes on appeal.
So if you do them every 3 years, you don't have to worry about a base year so much.
All the problems
Goes
go
away.
away.
Thank you.
Yeah, the 2012, you have sort of a case-by-case increase, is what it boils down to. Everybody stays the same unless you get appealed by the school district, and then, hit or miss, they go up.
Or unless you appeal, Senator.
No, I'm not.
You can have it lowered.
I'm not going there, no. I'm okay with mine.
I do public speaking, and I'll show a condominium on the same floor. Everyone has 2,000 square feet. All right? All three of them are paying, one person's paying $12,000 a year, one person is paying $3,000, and one is paying $5,000. One of them appealed and got it lowered. The school district appealed and got one raised. And the guy in the middle is stuck with the same base year bill. That's what happens over time.
I just want to point out, Controller Heisler, you talked about housing in Pittsburgh. This last week, PHFA awarded 6 more housing projects in the city of Pittsburgh. 2 in downtown Pittsburgh as part of the conversion process, 2 in Hazelwood, 1 in Homewood, and 1 in the Hill District. So that makes 12 in 2 years. So the role the PHFA has been playing is important to help establish a consistent affordable housing in our region.
Thank you.
Any final words for this panel? You've all been very helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very, very much. And I'm sure we'll follow up with any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We'll take a moment for testifiers to switch seats. For our second set of panelists, testifiers, I'm sorry.
Take your seat, John.
I'm going to sell it to you.
Where does he want us? How do you want us, Gary?
Wherever.
Wherever? Okay. Well, we have 3 this time.
So you have your mic to yourself. This is actually on. This one's on.
Okay, we are going to start now with our second set of testifiers on panel 2. We're going to talk about the impacts of the lack of reassessments on the effects on real estate here in our Commonwealth. And we are honored to have Sharon DiPaolo. Go ahead.
Sharon DiPaolo.
Okay,
That's
thank
fine.
you. Perfect, thank you. Who's a partner at Siegel Jennings. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson Muth, Senator Fontana, Senator Williams, and Senator Costa, and members of the committee, for the opportunity to present before you today. My name is Sharon DiPaolo. I'm an attorney. I'm from Pittsburgh, and I have spent the last 25 years of my legal career doing one thing: property tax throughout all of Pennsylvania's 67 counties. At my law firm, Siegel Jennings, that's all we do, property tax. We are celebrating our 50th year in business this year, and yes, our founder is still with us, Fred Siegel. And because my law firm does property tax work in all 50 states, I have had an opportunity to see how other states' property tax systems work. Because this is all I do, I talk about the need for countywide reassessment throughout Pennsylvania all the time. And in my travels throughout the state, interacting with all kinds of stakeholders, I can tell you that more than ever right now, something different's in the air. There is the will and momentum and the need for change. So I welcome the opportunity to spend time with you today, and I am grateful that you are opening this conversation in Pennsylvania. I will tell you the solution up front. It is triennial reassessment. Every county, every 3 years. Pennsylvania's property tax system ranks dead last, with a grade of F, tied with the state of Mississippi in the most recent 50-state comprehensive benchmark study prepared by the Council of State Taxation. Pennsylvania's worst place ranking is directly tied to our reliance on the base year and being the only state still using a base year. The committee titled today's hearing "The Cost of Inaction." I'm going to talk about 3 costs of inaction. The first cost of inaction, as you heard from the first panel, is the lack of a stable tax base. Pennsylvania's base year system, if I will use one example, and that is the city of Pittsburgh, by having no regular reassessments, our system has placed the city of Pittsburgh at a competitive disadvantage with every single city in the rest of the country by eroding the tax base with no way to make it up. We all know that with COVID and the move to a hybrid work environment, there's been a shocking overnight drop in the commercial office market. But that's not just in Pittsburgh, that's every city. But there's a difference. In every other major city in the country, including Philadelphia, which does do regular reassessment, every other city has already had 1 or 2 countywide reassessments since 2020. Every major city in the country has already restabilized its base since 2020. When the value of one segment of the commercial market goes down, another segment of the commercial market is going up. But in a base year system, there's no way to capture that upswing. Only the downswing is captured, as we heard in the first panel. Here, the taxing bodies cannot make up that loss by raising the millage rate, and they can't appeal their way out of the deficit. And while the city of Pittsburgh's office market is just one example, that same scenario, the failure to capture changes in the real estate market, is happening all across the Commonwealth, in counties whose last reassessment was 10, 20, or even 60 years ago. The second cost of inaction is the extraordinary cost in terms of both money and time in having infrequent countywide reassessments as we do in Pennsylvania. Part of the cost is the expensive years-long litigation when a taxpayer, as in Clifton or taxing bodies, sue for countywide reassessment, as we have seen play out in Beaver, Washington, Schuylkill, Allegheny, and other counties. Those lawsuits cost about $500,000 to get to the Supreme Court. Part of the cost is the time it takes to put a countywide reassessment in place, even when counties do it on their own initiative, such as when the county has no choice when it hits its millage rate cap. Just last week, at the Assessors Association of Pennsylvania's Reassessment Subcommittee, where we're studying this very issue, a committee on which I sit, an assessor said that one of their county commissioners wished they had a reassessment in their county yesterday because they're about to hit their millage rate cap, and they can't wait 4 to 6 years for a reassessment to be put into place. The third cost of inaction is harder to see because it's lost opportunity due to the chilling effect of investors who want to be in Pennsylvania's markets, but the uncertainty in the real estate tax prevents them from investing here. You don't see what doesn't get built. You don't see the deals that don't get done. I do. I get 3 calls a week from investors who want to build or buy in Pennsylvania. In my written materials, you'll see an example of a memory care facility that should have been built here in Allegheny County, but did not get built when the investor pulled out, even though they had an option on their land, because they couldn't make the taxes work. I can't tell you how many deals I have killed or offers that have been pulled after I explain our system. But there's a solution. It's mandatory, periodic, countywide reassessment in every county. It works. I propose a triennial countywide reassessment system under which assessments are updated every 3 years. 3 years is the right number because that will capture the market fluctuations. This cycle is supported by the industry associations I cite in my written materials and by the lived experience of all other states. I propose as a model the Ohio triennial system, which is widely believed to be the best in the country. In Ohio's system, a full countywide reassessment is done every 6 years. And in between, in the 3rd year, a statistical update is done. The Ohio model is less costly. In Pennsylvania, it costs $60 to $65 a parcel to reassess. In Ohio, it costs $15 to $20 in a full reappraisal year, that's the every 6 years, and only $2 to $3 a parcel in the statistical update year. The Ohio model results in far fewer appeals. In Pennsylvania, in a reassessment year, it is common for 20 to 25% of parcels to be appealed. In Ohio, in a full reappraisal year, that's the every 6 year, it's 1.5%. And it's even fewer in the years in between. Ohio and the other states have figured out how to fund these systems and how to oversee these systems, and we can too. I do need to mention an idea that has been floated that does not work, and that is a statistical trigger, where a statistical measure called the coefficient of dispersion would be the trigger to determine whether a county would be required to reassess. It sounds good, it sounds neutral, but it doesn't work for 2 reasons. First, as we have recently seen in Allegheny County with the common level ratio, a statistical measure is open to manipulation. We have none of the assurance that we do with cyclical reassessment that market changes will in actual practice be captured accurately and timely. Second, it has been tried and it has failed. In all the country, only one state, Vermont, has used a statistical measure as its trigger for countywide reassessment. In practice, what occurred in Vermont is that counties were not prepared to handle a countywide reassessment internally, and when market fluctuations caused the trigger to be hit, nearly all the counties hit the trigger at the same time, and there were insufficient resources from outside reevaluation companies to get them all done in a timely manner, and the state missed the ability to capture the market adjustments. For that reason, the Vermont legislature recently passed a new statute which takes effect January 1, 2025, which moves Vermont to a cyclical reassessment system, just as is used in the rest of the states in the country. So we have a solution. The triennial system I propose will lead to a stable tax base, consistent and reliable funding for our government, predictability for government and taxpayers alike, the ability to budget for government and investors, fairness and transparency for all. I thank you for your courage in opening this important conversation, and as a former teacher, I look forward to the day when Pennsylvania gets the A+ and builds the best property tax system in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your thorough written testimony. Much appreciated, and I like that there's the articles or studies linked out. So thank you. And we'll hold on. Hopefully you can hang around for the Q&A at the end. So next we have John Petrak, who's the Executive Vice President of the Realtors Association of Metropolitan Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Senators Williams, Muth, Fontana, Costa, and anyone else who happens to be online presently. As noted, my name is John Petrak. I serve as the Executive Vice President of the Realtors Association of Metropolitan Pittsburgh and represent its over 3,300 real estate professionals across southwestern Pennsylvania. Realtors are uniquely positioned to feel the critical pain points of their buyers and sellers when choosing where to call home. And our current irregular assessment system continues to harm Pennsylvania residents. In Pennsylvania, taxes are a vital revenue, obviously, of local, school, and county governments. Property tax bills are charged to consumers based on their assessed value times the millage. In theory, a county-wide reassessment of all properties creates these assessed values. However, as no county in our region reassesses annually, the county calculates and the State Tax Equalization Board approves the CLR, common level ratio, designed to take the market value of a property back to the equivalent value of the base year. Due to fluctuations in the market and issues with the common level ratio, this can cause consumers financial pain, let alone municipal and school district budget projections, as previously testified to. Let me give you a residential example of two houses on one street in Ross Township, just north of the city. The first house was sold in 2012 for $140,000, the year of the last county-wide reassessment. House number 2, which is literally next door, built in the same year with the identical square footage, assessed in 2012, also for $140,000, sold in 2021 for $240,000. The school district subsequently filed an appeal on the new owner, and the 21 CLR of 87 at the time was applied, creating a new assessed value of $208,800. So now house number 1 pays roughly $3,800 a year in real estate taxes, and house number 2, his next door neighbor, pays $5,700 in taxes. House number 2, again, that's 40% more because of the year they purchased their home. We've called this for many years the newcomer's tax. While the common level ratio is designed to balance out these fluctuations in current market value fairly, recent events have shown flaws in the calculation of those ratios. It also needs to be noted that adjustments to a consumer's escrow account payments can cause serious financial harm. When an escrow account is modified by the lender after an appeal is done, it can, I will use an example from many years ago, it can literally double to triple someone's escrow account for a short period of time. First-time buyers normally are buying to their limit, especially in today's marketplace, especially as the market's been the last few years. For a large adjustment in monthly payment to occur, again, especially a first-time homeowner, and especially in more modest marketplaces, that's an awfully tough, hill to climb. Additionally, for many buyers, this newcomer's tax is, again, unexpected. In the current market, first-time home buyers have more battle with than ever. Increasing home prices, higher mortgage rates, and low housing inventory. These factors stretch consumers' budgets, and if they are successful in finally achieving the dream of home ownership, they can be hit with a reassessment that makes that home now unaffordable. Market fluctuations and change in the CLR can also cause local governments financial strain, as other people have testified today. Due to a general downturn in commercial property vacancy rates and changes to the CLR, Many taxing bodies have seen unexpected reductions in revenue, leading to potential service cuts and tax increases. Though this can seem to be a localized problem, it echoes across all real estate markets and across the Commonwealth. Families, businesses, and governments benefit from expected and consistent tax bills. The longer a county goes without a reassessment, the more drastic and unequal those fluctuations are. These fluctuations, as we've seen, can lead to lawsuits that force counties to reassess and the cost associated with that. The fluctuations can cause backlogs in an assessment appeal system that counties must run at a substantial cost. Other states don't have to deal with this type of chaos. Every adjacent state requires mandatory reassessments or completes mandatory reassessments at the state level. I'm not going to mention all the states. They've basically been referenced already today. In Allegheny County, it's now been 12 years. Butler, Westmoreland County haven't been reassessed in over 50 years. The longer you go between assessments, the larger the issues. We can't keep kicking the can down the road. Presently, assessment systems in Pennsylvania, or lack thereof, create a jigsaw puzzle for the real estate consumer. I want you to think about that. I mean, a real estate consumer can buy in Butler County, Allegheny County, Westmoreland County, Washington County, and you know, we're fortunate we don't have the traffic problems they do in the Philadelphia area. I mean, I don't have to worry, I don't have to deal with the Schuylkill every day. But you know, honestly, you know, they can literally live anywhere in this marketplace and probably get to the central business district in a reasonable amount of time. With housing affordability, though, at a critical point, the real estate consumer deserves a consistent and equitable system. That stability will not only benefit the consumer, but also municipalities and school districts, which also eventually benefit the consumer. The median sales price of a single-family home in Pennsylvania presently sits at $295,000. The average Pennsylvania household income is slightly over $73,000. Even with a 10% down payment, the average Pennsylvania income doesn't qualify to purchase the average Pennsylvania house. To benefit the consumer and real estate markets generally, we need this stability. Mandatory and periodic reassessments are not just about dollars and cents. By embracing this practice, we ensure that everyone contributes their fair share. A statewide valuation system will provide an equitable system for all Pennsylvania property owners, while also fostering an environment where all our local economies can thrive. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I hope this gains traction and moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I'm sitting here taking notes and I'm now worried. Lindsay and I are concerned. But thank you, very thorough, and appreciate your expertise. And last but certainly not least, we have Dan Vatz from Pro Housing Pittsburgh. Thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is all yours.
It's David, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misread. Sorry. David, thank you.
Chairperson Muth, Senator Fontana, Senator Costa, Senator Williams, and esteemed members of the Senate who are joining us online, thank you very much for inviting me to speak about this critical issue. My name is David Vatz, and I'm the leader of a group, Pro Housing Pittsburgh, that advocates for housing abundance and affordability in the Pittsburgh region. We do this by working with community members and leaders alike to help create good land use policy, encourage housing production, and protect tenants' rights. Since starting our work in late 2021, we have attracted hundreds of members from the greater Pittsburgh area who are struggling with the cost of housing in our region. Our group strongly believes that the government of the Commonwealth must mandate frequent, regular, and fair reassessments. This shouldn't be an intractable political issue, even though sometimes it feels like that. In fact, it's an issue that has been solved by every state in the union, as has been noted by many of the speakers here, with the Commonwealth being the only holdout that doesn't require periodic reassessments in some form or fashion. This is an issue that harms equity and fairness for all Pennsylvanians, and we strongly encourage our leaders in the Senate and House to take immediate action on this problem. I wanted to provide some context on the issue by paraphrasing the testimony of one of our group members, Chris Beam, that was given at a hearing held by Allegheny County Council in May. I start with this because I think it neatly highlights the issues at play. Chris lives in Bloomfield in a row house that he and his wife bought back in 2018 for $220K. When they purchased their home, they were warned by their realtor that buying a house in Allegheny County could trigger a reassessment of the property and increase their property taxes by an unpredictably large amount. Before they bought their house, it had been assessed at $48,000, and they were worried that after buying it, their taxes would increase by up to 4 times if they ever received a letter from the county assessor in the mail. For them, that fear never materialized. Their assessment was never challenged and remains the same as before they purchased their house. Several of Chris's friends were not as lucky as he and his wife. A couple from their church purchased their first home in the Southside Flats in 2021 for just shy of $300,000. After closing on the home, they were reassessed to nearly $206,000. Despite their home being only 36% more expensive than Chris's home, they pay almost 6 times as much taxes to the county, city, and school district. It may seem obvious from this anecdote, but this is not a fair system. Why should some people pay unfairly high taxes while others get to skate by with an assessment that's way too low? Why do we allow municipalities to slowly shift their tax receipts from long-tenured residents to newer residents? And why do we allow neighborhoods that have received the most regional investment to pay less than their fair share while burdening neighborhoods and municipalities that have historically suffered disinvestment by freezing assessments at an arbitrary date? The de facto situation in the Commonwealth is that your home may get reassessed when you purchase it, but then your assessment will likely not change until after there is a countywide reassessment. John called it a newcomer's tax, but I would call it a mover tax, and it's harmful to Pennsylvanians of all ages and socioeconomic backgrounds. And it isn't just harmful to young people buying their first home or new residents to the area. It's important to remember that people who are moving aren't always doing so as a lifestyle choice. Many times, moves are required by changes in jobs or employment, changes in family situation, new kids, marriage, divorce, women escaping abuse, folks wanting to be nearer to family, and old age requiring downsizing or different accommodations. Our property tax system currently punishes folks who need mobility in their lives for all the reasons I stated. It's clear that this situation is both fundamentally unfair and also punishes the very things that we would like to encourage in our society. Whether a young couple is looking to have kids and needs to move into a larger home, or a senior citizen is hoping to downsize from their 4-bedroom house into a condo, we should not punish them by burdening them with a disproportionately high tax burden. In addition to those problems mentioned, our broken system also negatively impacts the housing supply across the Commonwealth. Building abundant new housing has been shown across the country and across the world as the best way for us to control the rising cost of housing. It has now become clear that much of the rise in rent and home costs in places like New York and California, and even in neighborhoods like Lawrenceville and Pittsburgh, are the result of decades of underbuilding of housing. However, because of the way our current system of assessment works, new homes that are built are all but guaranteed to attract the highest possible assessments, and the purchasers of those homes will be paying an unfair and disproportionately high amount of taxes relative to everyone else. This makes the cost of housing more expensive and creates disincentives for builders and depresses the overall supply of housing in the Commonwealth. Reducing the amount of housing that gets built doesn't only hurt the folks who might buy those homes, but also harms our union tradespeople who are often tasked with building new homes, particularly apartments and condos, and depresses our economy and sends economic growth to states that do not apply a disproportionate tax to new homes. As I mentioned at the beginning of my testimony, Pro-Housing Pittsburgh and our hundreds of members all feel strongly that the government must act to fix this problem with the assessment system in Pennsylvania. We strongly urge you to support frequent, regular, and fair reassessments. We should never be stuck in a situation where the simple act of assessing our properties to ensure all citizens are paying a fair and appropriate amount becomes an intractable political issue. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, David. I'll let Senator Fontana start the Q&A portion.
Thank you. Sharon, you mentioned you have a solution, right, which is the triannual. So you have a solution that identifies that and the process going forward. What we don't have here in Pennsylvania so far is the will to do it. And I think that's, what we're trying to establish. One of the biggest, I guess a couple of questions. One is who should, and it sounds like from Ira said earlier, it should be the General Assembly should have that will to do it. But one of the other objections that comes is cost. Every county, especially the ones that haven't done it in a while, they're going to have a big cost. So the question is, in other states, how did they overcome that issue? Because cost is going to definitely be an issue in going forward, the conversations that we have.
Yes, thank you. I agree that it does need to be the General Assembly that acts. It is the purview of the General Assembly to pass legislation. That is why I believe the Clifton Supreme Court in 2009 held off. They called upon the General Assembly to act. And in the most recent case from our Supreme Court, GM Berkshire, that came out in February 2023 out of Berks County, Justice Dougherty called on the legislature to act as well and said this expensive litigation. In other states, and I mentioned the Assessors Association of Pennsylvania has a reassessment subcommittee. We have been meeting regularly, gathering data from around the country, and on this issue, obviously cost is an oversight or really important issues. In other states, one way that the ongoing cost is paid for is by setting a mill rate just for countywide reassessment. Now that sounds crazy, but if you think about it, everybody's paying in their proportionate share. So it's actually a really elegant solution. It's in Ohio, the library tax that's like 0.0025 or, a tenth of a mill, pays for the reassessment. And so it's constantly getting funded. Now we're moving from inertia, right? We have to overcome that inertia. So we're probably looking at, in Pennsylvania, needing some central funding to get that flywheel moving until we get the traction of a dedicated mill rate like that. In terms of the political will, what I see in my travels and conversations, you just heard from everybody on the government side talking about this great big hole in their budgets. When we used to talk about this idea 5, 10, 15 years ago at conferences in the hallway, I attend a lot of national tax conferences. People are always like, what's going on in Pennsylvania? People used to say, that'll never happen, Sharon. Never happen in Pennsylvania. Now when I speak for the last 2 years, the school attorneys, the taxpayer attorneys, the assessors, the different stakeholders that are participating are all like, yeah, we need this, just like you're hearing today. So I feel a momentum. I can't explain it, but I feel it because I'm out there in those hallways and having meetings and conversations with people. We all want the same thing.
It's good to hear. Thank you. John, you want to answer that?
Yeah, if I can just add to that. Obviously, the cost, at the beginning would be tremendous, but there are...
Give me a ballpark on tremendous.
Oh, I'll be honest.
Millions.
Per county.
Millions.
Millions, yeah. But
it was 20 million, I think, 23 million in 2000 for the Sabre system one, if I recall. 24 million back then.
And not to interrupt you, but is that like if a county contracts out to a service versus in-house, like higher staffing up, like is there a difference in cost contract versus?
It's based on how many parcels.
That would be interesting to look at, but...
I was just, go ahead.
The one thing I wanted to add to what Sharon's comments is actually there are a variety of automated valuation models that can be implemented subsequent to the first year, which would drastically bring the cost down going into the future. So that's another concept or idea.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and this was brought up at the hearing that was held by Allegheny County's council back in May. I think the cost of doing it when you haven't done it in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you would expect that to be significantly higher than if you can build the muscle and build the machinery around actually doing it every 3 years or every 5 years on a periodic basis.
I think part of it is the cost to not do it. I think that's what I'm trying to balance out. There's going to be a cost to do it, obviously, but what is the cost? Can you quantify identify what the cost is not to do it, based on all the testimony that we've had. That would it cost the city? Would it cost the county? Would it cost the school districts, the municipalities? What's it cost them not to do it, as opposed to what it's going to cost to do it? And that's just initially. But then the cost to do it goes down, and maybe there's ways, as you mentioned, a millage or something like that to soften the blow, and then it will be programs, obviously, that Senator Williams talked about, and Senator Muth, to help seniors, those type of things as we go. Windfall, all those kinds of things can come into play, but I need a balance of.
And in terms of dollars, that number is going to come from the kind of numbers that the city controller and Ira Weiss for school district, by way of example, are giving you. Those losses that they're experiencing are because we're not reassessing. So when we're reassessing, it's revenue neutral. We have that baked in already with the anti-windfall. That revenue neutral is really important. On the one hand, it creates a disincentive, right, for school districts to file appeals, to file litigation. Let's have a reassessment, because at the end of it, they get this stable base. But when we have regular reassessment and it's revenue neutral, and you have COVID, they're still getting the same amount of money. They're not that loss that they all just discussed. That's not happening. That's not happening in Cleveland, because we're constantly making it up somewhere else.
Yeah, very good. John, I wanted to ask you, as a realtor, and I know when I was selling back in the day, that was a while ago, but people would talk about, well, I'm going to buy in Washington County because Washington County. I always couldn't help yourself. Or Butler or whatever, okay, I'll stick to Butler. And they would say that. They would want to move, they wouldn't want to be in Allegheny County because here's a reassessment coming. I'd rather go out there because they're not going to reassess. I would think there's some realtors sitting behind you. I know, I heard that. Have you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Obviously, that's still a consideration. We've been somewhat fortunate at the last maybe 5 to 10 years about the change in the economy in the city of Pittsburgh. We have to acknowledge that. But the city is still basically losing population.
Well, that's my point.
Even though it's not like it was in 1981. Or 83 for that matter, but the point is people still look at that. And to be quite honest, if you're a builder and you're building in Butler County, you're going to make a point of that. And I think, again, it was mentioned that it's been over 50 years since there's been any kind of reassessment in Butler County, and that's when I mentioned a jigsaw puzzle earlier. If you look at their millage is like 138.72 mills. Which in Pittsburgh is 13.92.
Right.
So it's a little difficult for a consumer to look at all these. They got to carry a calculator around in their pocket. Yeah.
And David, you mentioned Bloomfield and Southside, and as you're speaking, not my district, Senator Costa's district, but Southside was getting redone at that time. Bloomfield wasn't. So it seems like they targeted Southside on purpose because they knew the values were really going up, and so it was easier just to pick on them rather than do it a fair and equitable way.
Right, and I think that just speaks to the overall unfairness of the system. It's basically completely arbitrary. You don't know if when you buy a house it's going to get reassessed. You might get to keep the assessment that was done back in 2012 or 2000, or you might be stuck with a newer one. And there's no certainty for the consumer, and it's also just completely unfair to have a similar house paying 6 times as much taxes as another one, and they're a few miles away from each other.
And if you have a good realtor like we have that belongs to Ramp, they'll give that buyer a heads up that assessment might change and their taxes might change after they buy the house. Thank you.
Senator Williams.
So, Mr. Petrak, building on what Senator Costa just said, how have you and other realtors navigated talking to, potential new home buyers about that reassessment, and how have those conversations gone with, and is it different with residential properties or commercial properties and how that conversation, goes?
Yeah, obviously, any consumer is going to be concerned with that. It's not only, a monthly bill, basically, that's added on top of the mortgage. So, and it can be relatively significant, as David's example with the South Side property versus the Bloomfield property. That I think I didn't put a pencil to it, but you're literally probably talking an additional $400 per month in monthly payment. So yes, obviously it's a major concern for any consumer. They have to look at their, I'm going to give you an example of affordability, unfortunately, right now. If you have a first-time buyer with a $295,000 average sales price in the state, if you have a buyer who's fortunate enough to have the 5% down payment and the 7 to 10% in closing costs and prepaid items, you're talking about $38,000, roughly speaking.
It's a lot of money.
For a first-time buyer to collect over whatever period of time to be able to fortunately purchase that home. In the city of Pittsburgh, with a higher transfer tax and costs, it's another $4,000 to $5,000 more. So it's difficult already for first-time buyers or people of modest income to ever be able to become homeowners and build generational wealth. So anything that can be done that can help that particular marketplace, because if people can't buy their first home, the people in those homes can't move up, and the people in those middle structured homes can't move up higher. So that basically affects the real estate market on every level.
Mr. Vatz, you talked about, kind of the unfairness, and it reminded me that I was at a briefing not too long ago with the United Way, and they said the top two concerns that they hear are housing and utility costs. And that reflects the calls that come into my office. And so I'm reflecting on what Mr. Sully said in the first panel, which was, a third go up, a third stay the same, but a third get cut. Can you imagine for those people that are struggling to have their property taxes cut? That would make a big difference in those homeowners.
Yeah, and I think in particular, what you see is the people who are most likely to fight their assessments and fight for them to come down are generally people who are more wealthy. And so the people who get stuck with the bill are the least wealthy residents. And so, the system isn't just fundamentally unfair because it's arbitrary, it's also fundamentally unfair because the people with the most end up paying disproportionately less, and the people with the least end up paying disproportionately more.
Yeah. So I told Mr. Sully that I thought he had the quote of the hearing, and I think it's accurate. You can't appeal your way to uniformity, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit. Can't appeal your way to fairness. And I think that is what we've heard today. So thank you all for your testimony.
Senator Acosta?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, does anybody keep any statistics here? And you talked about the number of deals, so to speak, that left Pittsburgh or left our county. And John, you talked about when you guys and ladies advise people that to expect an increase in, in your property taxes. Does anybody monitor or keep any data on how frequently that happens? And is there something the association does or the assessors group does that would give us an indication of how serious that part of it is?
Yeah, that part's really hard because it's, proving a negative. And, my information is anecdotal or empirical because I take the calls. I can give an example of a broker called, who does multifamily, specializes in multifamily all over the country. And he told me that at their national conference in January in Florida every year, where they're doing deals, it's like their deal conference, and there's all kind of variables going in to whether they're doing a deal. There's a portfolio. It includes apartments in Pennsylvania or it doesn't, and all of that. The number one open question at their conference is Pennsylvania real estate taxes. It's like, I don't know what else you guys are doing over there. So I can see it. I don't know how to quantify it because I get those calls. I also know that our prices are lower because if they've talked to me, right, they want to say they're going to pay $25 million, and then they have the property tax system explained, and I'll get granular down to which school district, if you're going to get an appeal or not, anywhere in the state. And they'll be like, that can't possibly be true, Sharon, because if that's true, that means I have to take $5 million off my price. Yeah, you have to budget because that's going to happen. It's this school district, you're going to get an appeal. And so they pay 20. Now, do they get it? Sometimes. Do they not? But you're not getting realty transfer tax on 25, which you should. So it's really hard. I know that you guys really want the data. I've been struggling with how to quantify it for you.
Let me ask you, in terms of your discussions with potential families who are buying a home, whether in the city or in the county, does the fact that we have two different levels of our income tax in Pittsburgh is 3%, outside Pittsburgh it's typically 1%. Does that savings weigh into those conversations at all? Or does anybody bring that up to be sort of offset the difference in the property taxes?
Well, again, it would to some extent, depending on the consumer. Obviously, everybody's different, but to again kind of mention that even though that wage tax, there is a differentiation for wage tax, it would differ from each and every consumer. And unfortunately, also with the assessment appeal possibility, there's an unknown. So it's, again, I keep going back to the example I use as a jigsaw puzzle for a consumer. It's tough.
Last question. Do you at all monitor what school districts appeal the most? Does the city of Pittsburgh appeal more than some of the other, proportionally, than the other school districts around the region? Is there any monitoring of the number of appeals where they seek to increase the assessment as opposed to reduce it?
Great
Mike,
question.
you do that?
Yeah.
The school districts in Allegheny County are very, they employ their right to file an annual appeal. You can set your watch to it. In Westmoreland and surrounding counties, Butler, we don't see that quite so much. As you move to the middle of the state, not so much. The collar county routes around Philadelphia, they're all appealing. They're using different metrics. So it depends. But the closer you get to the city, the more that you see the schools appealing.
Actually, last question. Sharon, Joe DiPaolo and Sev Russo?
Joe DiPaolo is a good friend of mine.
Okay, he's not
We are
your
not
father?
related, but we are very
Okay.
good friends.
Well, there's somebody, they are in this space, they do a lot of work, as we all know. So,
Yes.
and very good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have 3 questions. I'll try to be quick. I was talking to my brother about this. He's moving back to Pennsylvania from Oregon. And so I was saying, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh this weekend because we grew up in Westmoreland County. And he said, well, in Oregon, we have a 3% cap on the max assessed value of the home for property taxes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that we've seen programs like that in states like California that have not been successful. They distort the market and they make it so that, by and large, I think it just exacerbates the mover tax. The people who have been there the longest have the lowest property taxes. And, you can see really stark examples of this in places like San Francisco, where property values have risen substantially, where there will be one house paying $3,000 a year in taxes, and the house next door paying $40,000 a year in taxes. I mean, really, really stark differences. So when you put limits like that, I think it overall ends up distorting the valuations of properties over time. I do think there's a place for programs like Loop to protect the most vulnerable residents to, as an anti-displacement measure, but those do have to be strictly targeted at people who have the most need and not merely like a blanket given to all homeowners.
Okay, thank you. No, I was something I hadn't learned, and I figured I'd ask since you're all here. And then in terms of the commercial property impact, we didn't really delve into a whole lot of that. So I don't know if you can give me like a 90-second explainer or like how the current system benefits bigger entities that purchase commercial property or doesn't, and then how the reassessment would change that.
Would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, There's a lot of discussion every time this issue comes up about commercial versus residential, but it's all the upswings. People focus on residential and say if residential's doing better, they're going to get hit. There's segments of the commercial market that are doing better. We're not capturing that. And they're not going to raise their hand and say, please reassess me. And, are the schools going to, what was it, the jigsaw puzzle to, sort of this jerry-rigged system of getting people raised to where they ought to be. It's just the third that you heard, and people think about it with residential, right? And their grandmas, and they're going to get reductions if they're in modest homes. The third is a standard used in the industry. All the reval companies will tell you that, the lived experience of our assessors, some of which are here today. That's not just something that Mr. Suley made up. That is, we know that's going to happen. So if we are reassessing regularly, and there are some segments of the commercial market that are doing better, we're grabbing that automatically. We're not sitting there in $1972 in Westmoreland County seeing something go in and saying, the assessors literally have their hands tied. They cannot assess that facility at current market value. They have to assess at $1972. If the school districts are not engaging in their statutory right, that value is it's not being captured.
So when we talk about the third, we're including residential and commercial?
Yes.
Got it.
Yes.
That's helpful. And then I just wanted to, I was talking over this topic over in just the tax system in general in Pennsylvania. And so we think about the ways that we generate tax revenue, and at the rate certain things are taxed, whether it's, personal income tax or sales tax, all of the ways, all of the mechanisms of gaining funding. And then, I guess I don't know if you agree, but I think it's difficult to change one piece of the overall tax system if the entities of the third that are going to be increased in their property tax, and then it's like, which one do you, like, how do you make the system overall more fair? Because not just this system, but other taxing forms are unfair. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, because in my head, it sort of seems like there might need to be an overhaul of how we tax a lot of things, or ensure that some entities pay their fair share in tax, because I think part of this equation with the schools is that our schools are not fully funded. So we have this, the state's not meeting its obligations, so local, taxes are being heavily relied on. And I live in a school district where there's zero commercial property. So it's a very interesting, situation where that's a complaint that comes up, that the resident tax burden is just literally on them versus having commercial entities. And I also live in a county that loves to preserve open space, but also complain about the lack of commercial property. So there's a tug of war existing in that space. But my question is, in terms of like the overall Pennsylvania tax code and structure as a whole, don't you think to achieve full equity or true equity, there needs to be some additional tweaks into this? Because we're talking about property owners. So when we hear people who want to end property tax or whatever, then we have to make up that funding, right? And so it's personal income tax where we haven't raised our minimum wage. And so like you're finding another inequity when you're trying to level off another, if that makes sense. Go ahead, David, you look like you're ready.
Well, I was just going to mention, and maybe not directly related to what you're saying here, but I think ultimately taxing the property on the land is perhaps not the best way to be going about things, and we should be thinking about alternative methods like focusing on more of a land value tax. Land value tax can help to ensure that land is being used to its highest and best everywhere across our cities and across the counties. It prevents things like land speculation when people buy up entire neighborhoods and sit on it and pay almost no taxes because there's either no structure on it or the structure is dilapidated. And I mean, I think that's a much larger change than what we're discussing here today, but I think it is something that the General Assembly should look into.
That actually, when I first came on the county council, there was a separate millage for land and a separate millage for building, and we changed that. We changed that as we went forward to make it easier. So maybe you're right. Maybe it should be different. Maybe it should be back to that.
Well, and ultimately, something like a land value tax doesn't punish people for improving their properties, which, improving properties is a good thing for our communities. It's, if people, particularly thinking about in the city and the current push from the city to densify and build more housing in the city, the thing is, if you're doing that thing which is considered good by many people, you then end up paying more taxes as a result of that. And so we're kind of disincentivizing this thing that is otherwise good. And so, the going back to the split rate tax or going to a pure land value tax could be something that could be examined that could potentially help.
To Senator Muth's point, I think we had a lot of discussion in the General Assembly about shifting off of a property tax. No one here mentioned that as a possible solution, which I think, now that she mentioned it, it's interesting no one's gone there. And I know the realtors were involved, and I was back and forth with that back in the day. But it doesn't work. When you look around, how many other states, maybe Sharon is, that actually made that a solution? I don't
think anyone's made that a solution, and it has been studied. I know that gets floated as an idea from time to time. The Assessors Committee has research on that, and I think, property tax is the oldest tax. And the reason, and it's not a liked tax, not a beloved tax, but the reason is because it's stable. We're not making any more land. It doesn't go with the fluctuations of income and the economy and things like that. And so every solution, this has been studied by the Lincoln Land Institute and by the Assessors Association and other research, it all comes back to property tax. And because in Pennsylvania, we actually fund our schools, and I'm a product of the public school system. I sent my children there. I believe in that. It hurts that we're up against Mississippi. With that grade. So we believe in funding our public school system, where property tax has to be part of it.
All right. John, you wanted to say something to me about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that you probably all recall SB 77, which
how could I forget?
We played with for years, trying to restructure how we fund our schools, and you could probably recall that because of the different structures of taxation across the Commonwealth, that there was a lot of
it made it difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm good. Thank you.
We're good? Well, thank you all very much for being with us today and being a part of this hearing. I think it was a very productive dialogue and certainly gives us a lot to follow back up on and look into and figure out how to push something forward, because as mentioned, something needs to be done, and it's obviously been said multiple times during this hearing that it's long overdue. And I think that that's a very fair statement, and unfortunately, Senator Williams and I are newer to the legislature, but we are learning that things are painfully slow and certainly not fair, and that we are want to work alongside you to make this issue right, and appreciate the experience of those before us who've been working on this issue for many years, and hopefully can be a major part of the solution moving forward. And I'll let Senator Fontana do his closing remarks.
Just to say thank you to everyone that testified and those of you that came to listen. Certainly appreciate that. I think that all the testimony was pretty compelling to where we want to go, what our mission is, what our goal is eventually. But, we realize that this can't be solved overnight. So we have to keep working at it. In the coming weeks and months, I plan to hold at least one more hearing scheduled to be in Harrisburg. Different testimony, but same goal moving forward. But I look forward to input as we go forward. I think Senator Muth mentioned that anyone who wants to view it again and comment and give us our opinions, please do that. We want to hear it, all of us up here, the others, but maybe everybody in the General Assembly, since they're the ones that have to eventually make the decision. And not only just senators, quite frankly, the House members that and please reach out and give me your opinion on this. And the other, as we move forward, there'll be more evidence, I'm sure, that we should do it. But we have to get the will to do it. We have to figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Senator Fontana. And I just also want to thank the county courthouse staff and administration for hosting us today, because it was very generous, their hospitality. And this is always a reliable place to host a hearing, connectivity-wise and facilities-wise. So thank you to them. And as we heard today, we know that we definitely need to change the system so that Pennsylvania has a fair and equitable property tax. And look forward to working with all of you moving forward, and enjoy the rest of your very hot afternoon. Thank you.